A dog keeps hugging a crying kitten, refusing to let go no matter what anyone tries. When a retired Army medic brings them to the vet, the German Shepherd protects her like his own life depends on it. But when the vet makes a shocking discovery during the examination, she bursts into tears, realizing the horrifying truth behind their connection. These two animals share a dark secret that goes deeper than anyone could imagine. Someone powerful will do anything to keep this truth buried forever. What happened to forge such a desperate bond? And when the past comes hunting for them, will love be enough to survive what's coming next? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The evening sun cast long shadows across the alley as Garrett Hayes made his regular patrol of the neighborhood, a habit he'd never quite shaken since his military days. Rex trotted faithfully beside him, their footsteps falling into the familiar rhythm they'd maintained since the German Shepherd had come into his life 5 years ago. A sharp whimper caught Rex's attention first. His ears perked up, and before Garrett could react, the dog had darted toward a dumpster behind the local grocery store. Garrett quickened his pace to follow, his combat-trained instincts automatically scanning the area for threats. "Rex? What have you found, boy?" The sight that greeted him made Garrett's heart clench. Rex stood over a tiny bundle of matted gray fur, a kitten that couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. The little creature was trembling, letting out pitiful mewls that seemed to pierce the evening air. What happened next left Garrett speechless. Rex, who typically maintained a respectful distance from cats, gently lowered his massive head and began nuzzling the kitten. His movements were incredibly tender, almost maternal in their care. "Well, I'll be damned," Garrett muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper beard. The kitten's cries grew louder, but instead of backing away, Rex curled his body around the tiny animal, creating a protective barrier between it and the world. Garrett crouched down, his knees protesting slightly. The kitten was clearly in distress. Its breathing seemed labored, and its eyes were crusted over. But what struck him most was Rex's behavior. The German Shepherd, usually alert and ready for action, had transformed into something entirely different, a gentle giant completely focused on comforting this helpless creature. "Easy there, Rex," Garrett soothed, reaching out slowly. But Rex let out a low whine, shifting his body to keep the kitten behind him. It wasn't aggressive, just protective, reminding Garrett of a mother shielding her pup. Okay, Garrett held up his hands. "But that little one needs help, buddy. We need to get it to a vet." The word vet usually made Rex's ears perk up with interest, but this time he remained focused solely on the kitten. Garrett pulled out his phone, quickly searching for nearby veterinary clinics. His eyes landed on one name, Doctor. Isabella Moreau's practice was only 10 minutes away and still open for another hour. Getting the kitten into his jacket was a delicate operation. Rex watched every movement intently, his amber eyes never leaving the tiny bundle. When Garrett finally managed to scoop up the trembling kitten, Rex pressed against his leg, as if making sure he could keep watch over his small charge. The walk to Dr. Moreau's clinic was unlike any Garrett had experienced with Rex before. The usually vigilant German Shepherd seemed oblivious to passing cars or other pedestrians, his attention completely fixed on the whimpering bundle in Garrett's arms. The clinic's reception area was mercifully empty when they arrived. A young woman at the desk looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the large German Shepherd practically glued to Garrett's side. "We found this kitten," Garrett explained quickly. "It needs help, and my dog here, well, he's acting mighty strange about it." Dr. Isabella Moreau emerged from an examination room moments later, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her intelligent brown eyes took in the scene, the trembling kitten, the hovering German Shepherd, and the concerned man standing between them. "I'm Dr. Moreau," she said, her voice warm but professional. "Let's take a look at our little patient." In the exam room, Rex's behavior became even more pronounced. When Dr. Moreau reached for the kitten, he let out a soft whine, pressing closer to the examination table. Rather than showing any aggression, his posture remained protective and gentle. "This is fascinating, Doctor," Moreau murmured, glancing between Rex and the kitten. "How long has he been displaying this behavior?" "Just found them about 30 minutes ago," Garrett replied, absently stroking Rex's head. "Never seen him act like this before. He's good with other animals, sure, but this is different." Dr. Moreau nodded, her hands gentle as she examined the kitten. "The little one is severely dehydrated and has an upper respiratory infection. Those are fairly common in strays, but..." She paused, her brow furrowing as she continued her examination. Rex hadn't moved from his spot, his eyes tracking every movement of the vet's hands. When the kitten let out a particularly distressed cry, he pushed his nose forward, trying to reach it. "In all my years of practice," Dr. Moreau said, "I've never seen a dog exhibit such strong maternal behavior toward a kitten they've just met. It's almost as if..." She trailed off, something flickering across her face that Garrett couldn't quite read. "As if what?" he prompted. "As if he recognizes something in this kitten," she finished slowly. "Something that speaks to him on an instinctual level." The kitten's cries had softened to quiet whimpers, but Rex's attention never wavered. He maintained his protective stance, his usual military-trained alertness channeled entirely into watching over this tiny creature that fate had placed in their path. Garrett watched as Dr. Moreau prepared medications and fluids for the kitten, his mind turning over the strange events of the evening. He'd seen Rex in countless situations during their years together, but this maternal, nurturing side was entirely new. It stirred something in his memory, a nagging feeling he couldn't quite place. "We'll need to keep the kitten overnight for observation and treatment," Dr. Moreau said, breaking into his thoughts. "But I have a feeling your Rex might have something to say about that." As if understanding her words, Rex let out another soft whine, his eyes never leaving the small bundle of fur on the examination table. The mystery of their unusual bond was just beginning to unfold, and Garrett couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than a simple case of animal instinct. Dr. Moreau's practiced hands moved gently over the kitten's tiny body, while Rex maintained his vigilant watch. Her initial examination had confirmed the obvious signs of distress, but something about the situation kept nagging at her professional instincts. "I'm going to need to check for a microchip," she explained to Garrett, reaching for her scanner. "It's standard procedure with strays." The kitten squirmed weakly as she passed the scanner over its body. A sharp beep broke the quiet of the examination room. Dr. Moreau's brow furrowed as she read the number displayed on the screen. "That's unusual," she muttered, more to herself than to Garrett. "What is it?" Garrett asked, his hand automatically moving to rest on Rex's head. "This microchip series." She paused, her fingers flying over her computer keyboard. "It's not from any standard veterinary supplier. In fact, it's from a research facility." Rex let out a low whine, pressing closer to the examination table. As Dr. Moreau continued her examination, she noticed something that made her pause. Parting the kitten's fur revealed a pattern of small, precise scars, the kind that could only come from systematic medical procedures. Her heart began to race as a horrible suspicion took root. "Mr. Hayes, would you mind if I checked Rex for a microchip as well?" Garrett's face clouded with confusion. "He has one, but it's probably not active anymore. Not since..." He swallowed hard. "Not since he disappeared 2 years ago." Dr. Moreau's hands trembled slightly as she ran the scanner over Rex's broad shoulders. Another beep, another number series. Her face went pale. "These chips," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're from the same facility. Blackwood Research Center." Garrett's posture stiffened at the name. "Blackwood? That's where I took Rex for what was supposed to be a routine checkup, the day he disappeared." Dr. Moreau's fingers flew across her keyboard again, pulling up files she'd been collecting for months. "Doctor." "Vincent Blackwood," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. respected research scientist, runs what appears to be a legitimate veterinary research facility, but I've had my suspicions for a while now." She turned her computer screen so Garrett could see. Too many animals disappearing. Too many unexplained transfers. I've been gathering evidence, but nothing concrete enough to act on. Until now. Garrett's weathered face had grown hard, his military training evident in his controlled reaction. "What exactly are you saying, Doctor?" Dr. Moreau gently parted Rex's thick fur, revealing scars that matched the pattern she'd found on the kitten. "These marks, they're consistent with repeated drug trials. The kitten was likely bred specifically for experimentation. And Rex ... She didn't need to finish. Garrett's hands had balled into fists, his knuckles white. "They stole him," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "They took my dog and used him as a test subject." Rex whined again, nudging the kitten with his nose. Dr. Moreau watched the interaction with new understanding. "That's why he's so protective," she said softly. "He recognizes the signs of drug-induced trauma in the kitten. The same trauma he experienced. These aren't random scars. They're injection sites, consistent with systematic drug testing." Garrett knelt beside Rex, gently examining the scars he'd somehow never noticed before. "All this time, I thought he'd just run away, or been taken by someone who wanted a trained military dog." His voice cracked. "He was suffering in some lab, being used as a test subject." Dr. Moreau's professional demeanor cracked slightly as she watched man and dog reunite with this new, horrible understanding. The kitten's symptoms, the respiratory distress, the neurological signs, they're consistent with withdrawal from experimental pharmaceuticals. I've seen similar cases, but never had enough proof to connect them to Blackwood. She turned back to her computer, her fingers moving with renewed purpose. "These microchip numbers are the evidence I've been looking for. They prove both animals came from Blackwood's facility. The kitten must have escaped or been dumped when the experiments were done." Rex hadn't moved from his protective position, his body forming a gentle barrier around the trembling kitten. His amber eyes seemed to hold years of unspoken pain, but also an unwavering determination to protect this small creature from the fate he had endured. "Rex must have escaped somehow," Garrett said, his military mind already working through the implications. "And now he's found this kitten, one of Blackwood's other victims." Dr. Moreau nodded, her face set with professional determination. "This is what I needed. Concrete evidence linking Blackwood to illegal animal experimentation. The matching microchips, the consistent scar patterns, the pharmaceutical traces I'm finding in the kitten's blood work. It's all part of a pattern." She looked up at Garrett, her dark eyes intense. "Mr. Hayes, what happened to Rex and this kitten? It's not an isolated incident. Blackwood's facility has been operating under the guise of legitimate research for years. But with this evidence..." "We can stop him," Garrett finished, his military training evident in his tone. He looked down at Rex, who was still gently nuzzling the kitten. "We can make sure no other animals suffer like they did." Dr. Moreau began gathering samples and documenting her findings, her movements precise and purposeful. "The kitten needs immediate treatment for withdrawal symptoms, and I'll need to document everything. Every scar, every test result, every piece of evidence we can gather." Rex remained steadfast in his vigil, his protective instincts now making perfect sense. He had recognized in the kitten's distress an echo of his own suffering, and his gentle nurturing was born not just of canine compassion, but of shared trauma. The truth of their connection, revealed through matching microchips and mirrored scars, had exposed something far darker than anyone could have imagined. But in that same revelation lay the key to bringing down the man responsible for their suffering. Dr. Moreau sat at her desk late into the evening, her computer screen casting a pale glow across stacks of carefully documented evidence. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number for the Veterinary Licensing Board. "This is Dr. Isabella Moreau," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I need to report evidence of illegal animal experimentation at Blackwood Research Center." The response on the other end made her stomach sink. Dr. Blackwood is a respected member of the research community, the board representative said dismissively. These are serious allegations, Doctor. Moreau, I suggest you consider the implications of making unfounded accusations. She tried the local police next, but received similar resistance. Without more substantial evidence, there's nothing we can do, the officer told her, his tone suggesting she should drop the matter entirely. That night, the first call came. You're making a mistake, a distorted voice warned. Mind your own business, Doctor. Moreau. The line went dead before she could respond. The next morning, she found an unmarked envelope pushed under her clinic's door. Inside was a single photo of her walking to her car the previous evening. The message was clear. She was being watched. Meanwhile, Garrett sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and his laptop. Rex lay at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to check on the kitten sleeping in a nearby basket. The former medic's military training had kicked in, driving him to investigate methodically. He'd started by researching the microchip numbers, which led him to a disturbing pattern. Local message boards and community websites were filled with stories of pets disappearing after routine visits to certain veterinary clinics. The same names kept appearing, all connected to Blackwood's research center. Look at this, boy, Garrett murmured to Rex, scrolling through another heartbreaking post. A golden retriever vanished during a standard checkup. German Shepherd disappeared after vaccines. Healthy cats never coming home from routine procedures. He ran a hand through his graying hair. They were all taken to clinics associated with Blackwood. Dr. Moreau arrived at her clinic the next morning to find her office phone filled with anonymous messages. Each one carried the same warning: back off or face the consequences. Her hands shook as she played the last message. Your practice license can be revoked very easily, the voice threatened. Accidents happen. Equipment malfunctions. Animals die. Think carefully about your next move, Doctor. When Garrett arrived to check on the kitten, he found her staring at her computer screen, her face pale. They're everywhere, she said quietly. The licensing board, law enforcement, other clinics. Blackwood has connections I never imagined. Military taught me something about enemies with powerful friends, Garrett replied, his weathered face grim. The bigger their protective network, the more they have to hide. Dr. Moreau nodded slowly, her initial fear hardening into determination. We're dealing with more than just one corrupt researcher, she said. This is an entire network of people willing to look the other way while animals suffer. The kitten mewed softly from its basket, and Rex immediately went to check on it. Watching them, Garrett's jaw tightened. Then we'll have to be smarter than them, he said quietly, and gather the kind of evidence they can't ignore. The security alarm's piercing shriek jolted Dr. Moreau awake. She'd fallen asleep at her desk, exhausted from treating emergency cases well past midnight. Her heart hammered as she heard glass shattering at the clinic's rear entrance. Rex, who'd been sleeping near the recovering kitten's cage, immediately sprang to attention. His ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Through the security camera's feed on her computer, Isabella watched three men in dark clothing force their way inside. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the records room. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Her trembling fingers dialed Garrett's number. They're here, she whispered. Blackwood's men. The line went dead. Of course, they'd cut the phones. Heavy footsteps approached her office. Rex positioned himself between the door and the kitten's cage, his protective instinct taking over. The small animal mewed softly, sensing danger. The door burst open. Two men entered, while a third headed for the medical records. Where are the files? One demanded, his face hidden behind a ski mask. Before Isabella could respond, the third man called out, Found them! And the chip reader. Get the animals, too, the leader ordered. Blackwood wants them both. Rex didn't wait. As one man reached for the kitten's cage, the German Shepherd launched himself forward with military-trained precision. His powerful jaws clamped down on the intruder's arm, drawing a scream of pain. The second man pulled out a steel baton. Isabella watched in horror as it connected with Rex's side with a sickening thud. But Rex didn't let go. He fought with desperate determination, knowing he was the only thing standing between these men and the terrified kitten. The third man joined the fight, landing brutal kicks to Rex's ribs. Still, the loyal dog held his ground, managing to drag one attacker down before the baton struck his head. Isabella grabbed a metal tray of surgical instruments, hurling it at the nearest assailant. "Leave him alone!" The sound of screeching tires outside announced Garrett's arrival. She'd texted him the moment she heard the alarm. The intruders, hearing the commotion, grabbed what they could and fled, leaving a trail of scattered papers and blood. Rex lay motionless on the floor, his breathing shallow. Blood matted his thick fur where the baton had split his skin. No, Isabella murmured, dropping to her knees beside him. Her medical training took over as she assessed his injuries. Multiple contusions, possible internal bleeding, severe head trauma. Garrett burst in, his military training evident in how he quickly secured the room. When he saw Rex, his face went pale. "How bad?" "He needs surgery now," Isabella said, already gathering supplies. "Help me get him on the table." Together, they lifted Rex's limp form. The kitten watched from its cage, crying softly as if understanding the sacrifice Rex had made. For the next 2 hours, Isabella worked feverishly to save Rex's life. Her hands remained steady even as tears blurred her vision. Garrett assisted, his combat medical experience proving invaluable. "Come on, boy," Isabella whispered as she worked to stop the internal bleeding. "Stay with us. Stay with us." Rex's heart rate dropped dangerously low twice during the surgery. Each time Isabella fought to bring him back, refusing to let Blackwood claim another victim. "He saved that kitten," Garrett said hoarsely, watching the monitors. "He knew exactly what they'd do to it." "He's not just protecting the kitten," Isabella replied, her voice thick with emotion. "He's fighting for every animal still trapped in Blackwood's lab, and so are we." Finally, in the early hours of the morning, Isabella stepped back from the operating table. "He's stable. The next 24 hours will be critical, but he's fighting." Garrett stroked Rex's head gently. "That's my boy." Looking around her ransacked clinic, Isabella felt anger replace her fear. "They took everything, all our evidence, all our records." "Not everything," Garrett corrected grimly. "They didn't get what matters most. We're still here. Rex is still here. And now we know exactly what we're dealing with." Isabella nodded, watching the kitten curl up as close to Rex's recovery bed as its cage would allow. "We're the only ones who can stop this, aren't we?" "Yes," Garrett agreed. "We're all that stands between Blackwood and God knows how many other animals suffering in his lab." The sun began to rise, casting long shadows through the broken windows of the clinic. Rex's vital signs remained steady, his warrior spirit refusing to give in. The kitten purred softly, as if encouraging its protector to heal. Dr. Moreau rubbed her tired eyes as she studied the lab results on her computer screen. She'd been analyzing blood samples from both Rex and the kitten for hours, while Garrett dozed in a chair beside Rex's recovery bed. The loyal German shepherd's vital signs had finally stabilized, though he remained heavily sedated. Something about the test results didn't make sense. The compounds in both animals' blood weren't typical research chemicals. She'd seen similar molecular structures before, but not in any legitimate pharmaceutical trials. "This can't be right," she muttered, drawing Garrett's attention. "What is it?" he asked, straightening in his chair. Isabella pulled up another screen. "These compounds, they're similar to illegal performance enhancers, the kind used in underground fighting rings." Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she dug deeper. "But Blackwood's facility is supposedly doing pharmaceutical research. He's been selling results to major drug companies." The kitten mewed pitifully from its cage, its small body trembling. Isabella's heart ached as the pieces finally clicked into place. "That's it," she breathed. The animals weren't being used for legitimate research at all. Blackwood's been using them to test illegal performance-enhancing drugs. The pharmaceutical research is just a cover. She turned to Garrett, her face pale. The kitten's neurological distress is not just trauma, it's withdrawal. They were experimenting with some kind of new compound on it. Garrett moved to the kitten's cage, gently stroking its fur through the bars. That's why Rex has been so protective. He recognized what was happening to it. Exactly. Isabella pulled up Rex's old medical records from before his disappearance. Rex was probably used to test earlier versions of the same drugs. The physical and neurological trauma would be identical. When he found the kitten, he knew exactly what it was going through. The kitten pressed against Garrett's hand, its crying momentarily subsiding. On the recovery bed, Rex stirred slightly, as if responding to the kitten's distress, even in his sedated state. The fighting rings must be paying Blackwood a fortune to develop these drugs, Isabella continued. And he's double-dipping by selling fake research data to pharmaceutical companies. She shook her head in disgust. No wonder he has so many people in his pocket. She stood and walked to Rex, checking his vitals again. These animals suffered horribly. The compounds they used... Her voice broke. The pain would have been excruciating. And Rex, he endured it for 2 years. Garrett's jaw clenched, and still came out gentle enough to recognize and protect another victim. He looked at Rex with pride and pain in his eyes. Even after everything they did to him, he didn't lose his heart. The kitten's crying intensified again, its small body racked with tremors. Isabella quickly prepared a mild sedative, one that would help ease its withdrawal symptoms. Now that we know what we're dealing with, we can treat them both properly, she said, carefully administering the medication. And we have proof of what Blackwood's really doing. This isn't just animal abuse anymore. It's organized crime. The kitten gradually relaxed as the medication took effect. Rex's protective instincts had saved it from a fate he knew all too well. Their shared trauma had forged a bond that transcended species, a testament to the resilience of spirits that refused to be broken by cruelty. Isabella watched as the kitten finally drifted into peaceful sleep, its first real rest since being brought to the clinic. Beside it, Rex's steady breathing seemed to match its rhythm, guardian and ward united in healing. We'll need to document everything, she said quietly. Every compound, every test result, every connection to the fighting rings. We have to make sure Blackwood can't hurt any more animals. Garrett nodded, his expression determined. And this time, we'll take it to people who can't be bought. This is bigger than corrupt local officials now. The morning sun filtered through the clinic windows, casting a gentle light on the sleeping animals. Their shared suffering had revealed the true scope of Blackwood's evil, but it had also shown the incredible capacity for compassion that could survive even the darkest experiences. The evening sun cast long shadows across Dr. Moreau's clinic as she and Garrett huddled over blueprints spread across her desk. Empty coffee cups littered the surface, evidence of their hours of planning. The security system has blind spots here and here, Garrett said, pointing to the corners of Blackwood's facility diagram. His military training showed in the precise way he mapped out their approach. If we time it right, we can slip in through the service entrance during shift change. Isabella nodded, marking the locations of what she assumed were the animal holding areas. Based on the building layout, they'll keep the test subjects in these climate-controlled rooms. Standard protocol for research facilities. Rex lay nearby, still recovering, but alert, watching them intently as if he understood their mission. The kitten slept peacefully in its cage, finally stable after days of treatment. We'll need to move fast, Garrett continued. I can disable the cameras, but we'll have maybe 20 minutes before someone notices. That should be enough time. I can identify which animals need immediate medical attention. Isabella pulled out her medical kit, double-checking her supplies. The sedatives are ready if we need them. They waited until midnight before putting their plan into action. The facility sat dark and quiet on the outskirts of town, its respectable facade hiding the horrors within. Garrett led them through the shadows, moving with the silent efficiency of his military days. The service entrance lock yielded to Garrett's expertise, and they slipped inside. Isabella's heart pounded as they crept through the sterile hallways, their footsteps echoing despite their care. "Something's wrong," Garrett whispered, stopping abruptly. "It's too quiet." Isabella felt it too. No sounds of animals, no hum of climate control systems. They pushed through a set of double doors into what should have been the main holding area. Empty cages lined the walls. Not just empty, cleaned out. No food, no water bottles, no bedding. The entire facility had been stripped bare. "No," Isabella breathed, rushing to check the other rooms. "They must have moved them. Recently, these floors were just cleaned." Garrett's face hardened as he examined a loading dock receipt. 3 days ago, everything was transferred to a warehouse outside town. He crumpled the paper in frustration. Blackwood knew we were coming. A sudden flash of light through the windows made them freeze. Car headlights swept across the building's interior. "Security patrol," Garrett hissed. "We need to move. Now." They ran, no longer worried about stealth, their footsteps thundering through the empty facility. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside. Isabella's lungs burned as they burst through an emergency exit. The alarm blared behind them as they sprinted across the parking lot, diving into the shadows of nearby trees just as flashlight beams cut through the darkness. They didn't stop running until they reached Isabella's car, parked several blocks away. Both collapsed into the seats, gasping for breath. "He's always one step ahead," Isabella said when she could finally speak. "We thought we were being so careful, but he knew." Garrett stared through the windshield, his jaw tight. "We telegraphed our moves. The break-in at your clinic, the blood tests, the research into his operation. He's been watching us the whole time. And now he knows we're willing to take direct action." Isabella's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. "We're more exposed than ever." "But we learned something valuable," Garrett said. "We know he's running scared. Moving an entire operation that fast, that's not the action of someone who feels secure." Isabella started the car, carefully pulling away from the curb. "We need to find that warehouse, but this time we do it differently. No paper trail, no electronic searches that can be monitored." "Old school," Garrett agreed. "I still have contacts from my service days who can help. People Blackwood can't trace or buy off." The drive back to the clinic was tense, both of them watching for signs of being followed. The failed rescue attempt had shaken them, but Isabella felt their resolve strengthening rather than weakening. "Those animals are suffering every minute we don't find them," she said as they pulled into the clinic's parking lot. "We can't give up." "We won't," Garrett assured her. "This was just round one. Now we know what we're really up against." Inside the clinic, Rex greeted them with a soft whine, sensing their disappointment. The kitten stirred in its cage, letting out a questioning mew. Isabella checked both animals, taking comfort in their presence. "We'll find the others," she promised them softly. "We just need to be smarter about it." Garrett began clearing away their earlier planning materials, destroying anything that could be used to track their movements. "Next time, we'll be the ones Blackwood doesn't see coming." The night's failure hung heavy in the air, but beneath it ran a current of determination. They had underestimated their opponent once. They wouldn't make the same mistake again. The letter arrived on Chris' department letterhead, its official seal mocking Isabella as she read it for the third time. Her hands trembled as the words blurred before her eyes. "License suspended pending investigation of serious ethical violations." She sank into her office chair, the morning sunlight streaming through the window, feeling suddenly cold. The accusations were absurd. Falsified medical records, unauthorized experimental treatments, negligent care, but Blackwood's influence made them stick. "He's trying to destroy everything I've built," she whispered to Rex, who lay in his recovery bed nearby. The German shepherd's concerned amber eyes watched her, his tail offering a gentle thump of support despite his own discomfort. The kitten's pitiful cry from the isolation unit tore at her heart. Its neurological symptoms were getting worse, not better, and now she couldn't legally treat either animal. The clinic phone rang, and Isabella answered mechanically. "Doctor, Moreau's Animal Hospital." "Doctor, Moreau," a gruff voice barked. "This is Fire Marshal Collins. We've had reports of a gas leak at your location. You need to evacuate immediately." "Gas leak? That's impossible. We just had our quarterly inspection last week." "Ma'am, this is a public safety issue. Clear the building now. My team is en route." Isabella's mind raced as she hung up. This was no coincidence. "Sarah," she called to her receptionist, "start calling owners to cancel today's appointments. We need to evacuate." Within minutes, fire trucks screamed into the parking lot, their lights painting the walls red. Firefighters in full gear stormed in, ordering everyone out. Isabella struggled to quickly gather essential supplies and medications for Rex and the kitten. "Ma'am, you need to leave now," a firefighter insisted, trying to hurry her along. "These animals are critical patients," she protested. "I can't just—" "Now, ma'am!" Outside, Garrett's truck screeched to a halt. He'd been on his way to check on Rex when he saw the commotion. His military training took over as he helped Isabella carefully move Rex and the kitten to his vehicle. "This is Blackwood," he said grimly, watching the firefighters string yellow caution tape across the clinic's entrance, creating chaos to shut you down completely. Isabella nodded, fighting back tears as she monitored the distressed kitten. "The suspension wasn't enough for him. He wants to make sure I can't help anyone, even unofficially." They drove to Garrett's small house on the outskirts of town, the only safe place left for their four-legged patients. His spare room became a makeshift recovery ward, with Rex's bed in one corner and the kitten's intensive care set up in another. "The kitten's getting worse," Isabella admitted that evening, her professional composure finally cracking. "Without proper medical equipment, without my license." She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. "Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, gone." Just like that. Garrett sat beside her on his worn couch, carefully placing a cup of coffee in her hands. "You haven't lost everything," he said quietly. "You still have your knowledge, your skills. Most importantly, you have your integrity. That's something Blackwood can never take away." She looked up at him, seeing the same determination in his eyes that had carried him through war zones. "How do you do it? Keep fighting when everything seems hopeless?" "Because giving up isn't an option." He gestured toward the spare room where Rex and the kitten rested. "They need us. All those other animals in Blackwood's warehouse need us. Sometimes standing up for what's right means losing everything else first." The kitten's cry interrupted them, a weak, painful sound that brought them both rushing to check on it. Isabella's hands moved automatically through the examination, her face growing more worried. "The neurological damage is accelerating," she said. "Without proper treatment, without my equipment." She trailed off, the weight of their situation crushing down. Rex whined from his bed, trying to reach the kitten despite his own injuries. The bond between them remained strong, even as both suffered. "I failed them," Isabella whispered, dropping to her knees between the two animals. "I failed every animal that needs help. What kind of veterinarian am I if I can't even—" "Stop." Garrett knelt beside her, his hand finding hers. "You haven't failed anyone. Blackwood did this. He's hurting them, not you." His grip tightened. "And we're going to stop him." She turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they were, how his presence had become a source of strength over these past days. "How?" "He has everything. Money, connections, power. We have nothing." "We have the truth," Garrett said firmly, "and we have each other. Sometimes that's enough to start turning things around." The kitten mewed again, and Isabella automatically reached out to comfort it. Her doctor's instincts wouldn't let her give up, no matter what some letters said about her license. "You're right," she said finally. "Blackwood thinks he's broken us. But maybe—" She straightened up, professional determination returning to her face. Maybe losing everything just means we have nothing left to lose." Garrett smiled, recognizing the spark of fight returning to her eyes. "Now that's the doctor I know." They spent the rest of the night caring for their patients, working together with the seamless coordination they'd developed. And if their hands lingered when passing supplies, if they drew strength from each other's proximity, well, that was something else Blackwood hadn't counted on. The morning would bring new challenges, but for now, they focused on what they could control. Keeping Rex and the kitten stable, documenting everything for eventual evidence, and planning their next move. Their clinic might be closed, but their fight was far from over. Isabella spread the building plans across Garrett's kitchen table, her fingers tracing the warehouse's layout. "The presentation room is here, on the second floor. Blackwood will be showcasing his research results to pharmaceutical representatives." "Perfect distraction," Garrett noted, his military training evident in how he analyzed the blueprints. "While he's busy impressing his buyers, we can access the kennels through the loading dock here." He pointed to the rear entrance. Isabella nodded, trying to keep her hands steady. "I've made contact with Dr. Sarah Chen at the Military Working Dog Veterinary Service. She's helping build our case with federal authorities." "Good thinking," Garrett said, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "Military channels are harder for Blackwood to monitor or corrupt." They'd been working from Garrett's house for the past week, converting his spare room into a planning center. Maps and surveillance photos covered the walls, along with detailed notes on Blackwood's operation. Rex watched them from his bed near the window, while Hope dozed in her carrier. Her neurological symptoms slightly improved under Isabella's careful treatment. "The federal agents need concrete evidence," Isabella explained. "Documentation of the illegal drug testing, proof of stolen animals, financial records, anything that shows the scope of his operation." Garrett pulled out his tactical gear from his Army days. "I can get us in. The real challenge will be gathering enough evidence before security realizes we're there." "I know exactly what we're looking for," Isabella assured him. "Patient records will be in their medical database. If we can access a computer in the treatment room, I can download everything." Their eyes met across the table, and Isabella felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Working so closely with Garrett, seeing his dedication and strength, had awakened feelings she hadn't expected. From the way his gaze lingered on hers, she suspected she wasn't alone in those feelings. "The presentation is in 3 days," Garrett said softly. "Are you sure about this? It's dangerous, and you've already lost so much." Isabella reached for his hand, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm sure about us. About what we're doing." She squeezed his rough, calloused fingers. "These animals need us, and I trust you, Garrett." He held her hand firmly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "We'll need to time this perfectly. The presentation starts at 7 o'clock in the evening. Security will be focused on the visitors upstairs." "Dr. Chen says the federal agents will be standing by," Isabella added, "but they need probable cause before they can move in. We have to find concrete evidence of criminal activity." They spent hours refining their plan, working through every detail. Garrett taught Isabella basic tactical hand signals and emergency protocols, while she briefed him on what evidence would be most damaging to Blackwood's operation. "If anything goes wrong," Garrett said, showing her how to use the small radio he'd acquired, "we abort immediately. No heroics." Isabella nodded, trying to memorize everything. "The animals in that facility have suffered enough. This might be their only chance at rescue." Rex padded over to them, resting his head on Isabella's lap. His surgical site had healed well, and his protective instincts seemed stronger than ever. Hope mewed from her carrier, as if sensing the tension in the room. "We'll need to leave them here during the operation," Isabella said, scratching Rex's ears. "Mrs. Peterson next door agreed to check on them." Garrett watched them with soft eyes. "They brought us together, you know. Rex finding Hope that day. It led us to all of this." Isabella looked up at him, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite name. "I'm grateful," she said quietly. "Not for what Blackwood did to them, but for finding you. for having someone to fight alongside. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings and growing trust. Then Garrett cleared his throat and turned back to the plans, though his eyes still held that tender look. They worked late into the night, going over every detail until they could recite the plan in their sleep. 3 days wasn't much time to prepare for an operation that could save dozens of animals or cost them everything they had left. But with federal authorities standing by and their combined skills, they had a real chance at bringing Blackwood's operation down. As Isabella finally gathered her things to head home, Garrett walked her to the door. "Be careful these next few days," he said. "Blackwood might be watching." "You too," she replied. "We've come too far to fail now." Their eyes met one last time, and for a moment Isabella thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently. "3 days," he said. "Then we end this." She nodded, drawing strength from his quiet confidence. Together, they would bring justice to the animals who had suffered in Blackwood's facility. Together, they would make things right. The warehouse loomed dark and imposing against the evening sky. Garrett checked his watch, 6:55 in the evening. Above him, cars pulled into the parking lot as pharmaceutical representatives arrived for Blackwood's presentation. Garrett moved silently along the building's perimeter, his military training taking over. The loading dock door's lock proved no match for the tools he'd brought. Inside, the warehouse air hung thick with antiseptic and something worse, the unmistakable smell of animal suffering. Row after row of kennels filled the dimly lit space. Whimpers and weak barks echoed off concrete walls. Garrett's heart clenched as he moved between the cages, documenting everything with the small camera Isabella had given him. A golden retriever cowered in one cage, its fur matted and eyes glazed from drug testing. In another, a Siberian husky paced restlessly, showing signs of the same neurological distress that had affected Hope. Each animal bore evidence of experimentation, surgical scars, injection sites, and the hollow look of prolonged captivity. "Oh, God," Garrett whispered, recognizing several pets from the missing posters he'd researched. A chocolate lab named Charlie, a border collie called Scout. All stolen, just like Rex had been. He reached the facility's computer terminal and plugged in the thumb drive containing Isabella's decryption program. The screen flickered to life, revealing hundreds of test records and financial transactions. "Federal agents are standing by," Isabella's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Do you have access?" "Downloading now," Garrett replied softly. "Isabella, there are dozens of animals here, some in critical condition. Keep going, we need Dash." The lights suddenly blazed on. Garrett spun around to find Blackwood standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed security guards. "Mr. Hayes," Blackwood said smoothly, though his eyes were cold, "I wondered when you'd try something like this, though I must admit, I expected Dr. Moreau to be here as well." "It's over, Blackwood," Garrett said, positioning himself between the guards and the thumb drive still copying files. "We know everything, the stolen pets, the illegal drug testing, the fighting rings." Blackwood's practiced smile didn't waver. "And who exactly is going to believe you? A traumatized veteran and a discredited veterinarian." He nodded to his guards. "Remove him, and make sure there are no survivors to complicate matters." The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, a familiar bark echoed through the warehouse. Rex burst through the loading dock entrance, moving with fierce determination despite his healing injuries. He slammed into the first guard, sending the man's weapon skittering across the floor. "Rex, no!" Garrett shouted, but his loyal companion was already charging Blackwood, recognizing the man who had caused him so much pain. The second guard turned to shoot, but Garrett tackled him, sending them both crashing into a stack of supply crates. Blackwood scrambled backward as Rex cornered him, teeth bared and hackles raised. "Call him off," Blackwood demanded, his composed facade cracking. "These animals are my property." "They're not property," Isabella's voice rang out as she appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a team of federal agents in tactical gear. "They're living beings you tortured for profit." The agents swarmed in, weapons drawn. "Doctor," Vincent Blackwood, the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for animal trafficking, illegal drug manufacturing, and conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines." Blackwood's face contorted with rage as he was handcuffed. "You have no proof." "Actually, we do," Isabella said, holding up her tablet. "Every file your system contained has been transmitted to federal authorities, including your connections to underground fighting rings in 3 states. More agents poured in, along with a team of veterinary specialists Isabella had coordinated with. They began immediately assessing the animals, preparing them for transport to emergency treatment facilities. Rex maintained his protective stance until Blackwood was led away, then limped to Garrett's side, exhausted but proud. Garrett knelt beside him, checking his injuries while fighting back tears. "You brave, beautiful boy," he whispered, hugging Rex close. "You helped save them all." Isabella joined them, her eyes shining as she watched rescue teams carefully removing animals from their cages. "The evidence is overwhelming," she said. "Blackwood's entire network is exposed. The licensing board is already moving to revoke credentials from everyone involved." Garrett stood, wincing from his bruised ribs. "What happens to the animals?" "Emergency veterinary teams will stabilize them," Isabella explained. "Then we'll work to identify and contact their original owners." She touched his arm gently. "We did it, Garrett. We really did it." They watched as more federal agents documented the facility, gathering evidence from every corner of Blackwood's operation. The animals were being carefully loaded into transport vehicles, finally free from their terrible captivity. Rex sat between them, alert despite his exhaustion, watching over the rescue operation like a proud guardian. His journey from victim to hero had helped expose a criminal enterprise and save countless other animals from suffering the same fate. "Come on," Isabella said softly, scratching Rex's ears. "Let's get everyone to safety. We have a lot of families to reunite." Together, they walked out of the warehouse, leaving behind the darkness of Blackwood's cruelty and emerging into a night bright with the lights of justice and hope. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Dr. Moreau's newly reopened clinic, casting warm light across the freshly painted walls. The waiting room buzzed with activity as federal investigators continued their work, piecing together the full scope of Blackwood's operation. "Another shell company uncovered in Nevada," Agent Thompson announced, spreading documents across Isabella's desk. "The money trail connects him to fighting rings in 6 states, not just 3. Isabella nodded, reviewing the financial records that revealed years of criminal enterprise. "And the veterinary board?" 15 licenses suspended so far, the agent confirmed. "More suspensions coming as we identify everyone who helped hide his operation. Your reputation has been completely cleared, Dr. Moreau. The board is even considering appointing you to help oversee new oversight protocols." In the recovery ward, Garrett sat cross-legged on the floor beside Rex's bed. The German Shepherd had made remarkable progress since the warehouse raid, his surgical incisions healing cleanly. But it was his emotional recovery that touched Garrett's heart the most. Hope, the tiny tabby kitten they'd rescued from behind the dumpster, curled against Rex's broad chest. Her constant crying had finally stopped 3 days ago as the last of Blackwood's experimental drugs cleared her system. Now she purred contentedly while Rex gently groomed her fur, his protective instincts transformed into genuine paternal affection. "Look at you two," Garrett murmured, smiling, as Hope batted playfully at Rex's nose. "Who would have thought a tough military dog would become such a devoted dad?" Isabella entered quietly, carrying fresh bandages for Rex's final checkup. "Their bond probably saved both their lives," she said, kneeling beside Garrett. Rex recognized Hope's trauma because he'd experienced it himself. Now they're helping each other heal. She began carefully unwrapping Rex's bandages, while Hope watched attentively from her spot against his chest. The kitten had grown protective of Rex too, as if understanding everything he'd done to save her. The property papers came through this morning, Isabella said, her eyes bright with excitement. 20 acres just outside town. Perfect for what we discussed. Garrett's heart quickened. They'd spent countless late nights planning the sanctuary, drawing up designs for rehabilitation spaces and recovery areas. When can we start building? The contractor can break ground next week. Isabella finished checking Rex's injuries and sat back, satisfaction evident in her smile. The federal seizure of Blackwood's assets included a victims' compensation fund. Several of his former investors have also made donations to the sanctuary project, trying to salvage their reputations. Turning blood money into something beautiful, Garrett mused, watching as Hope stretched and yawned before snuggling closer to Rex. These two deserve to be our first residents. Isabella's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. What had started as a shared mission had blossomed into something deeper, built on mutual respect and understanding. They'd seen each other's strength and compassion in the darkest moments, forming a connection that went far beyond their initial alliance. "I've been thinking about names," Isabella said softly, "for the sanctuary." "Oh?" Garrett turned to face her, admiring how the morning light caught the warmth in her brown eyes. "New Hope Animal Sanctuary," she suggested, "named after our brave little survivor here." Hope perked up at the sound of her name, her once sad eyes now bright and alert. She chirped a tiny meow that made both humans laugh. "It's perfect," Garrett agreed, squeezing Isabella's hand. "A place where broken spirits can find healing, just like these two did." Rex lifted his head, looking between Garrett and Isabella with intelligent eyes that seemed to approve of their plans. His tail thumped steadily against the bed as Hope began kneading his fur, purring so loudly it filled the quiet room. The scene before them represented everything they'd fought for, not just justice against Blackwood's cruelty, but the possibility of healing and new beginnings. Rex, once stolen and tortured, now embodied gentle strength as he cared for his tiny adopted daughter. Hope, bred for suffering, had found joy and security in the most unexpected family. Isabella leaned against Garrett's shoulder, her presence warm and reassuring. "We should take them home," she said quietly. "They've spent enough time in clinics, even good ones." Garrett nodded, understanding completely. Their shared home had become another symbol of their intertwined lives, a cozy haven where Rex had his own bed next to Hope's climbing tower, though the kitten preferred sleeping curled against her protective guardian. As if reading their thoughts, Rex carefully stood, mindful of Hope's position. The kitten adjusted herself, climbing onto his broad back with practiced ease. She had made this her favorite perch, riding regally atop her adopted father as he carried her around. "Ready to go home, you two?" Garrett asked, rising to his feet and helping Isabella up. Rex's tail wagged as he padded toward the door. Hope balanced perfectly on his back. The kitten's purring continued, a constant sound of contentment that had replaced her earlier cries of distress. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.